Happy Monday. Welcome to the show. It is now looking extremely unlikely that the government will pass the contentious doctor-assisted dying bill into law by the June 6th deadline imposed by the Supreme Court. That's just 1 week from today. In about 90 minutes' time, MPs will begin voting on a series of amendments to Bill C-14. The government hopes to pass it in the House tomorrow and then, of course, move it on to the Red Chamber, to the Senate. But many senators say they won't cut corners or rush the bill. So what happens if the government doesn't meet the deadline? Are there safeguards in place to protect patients and medical practitioners? Joining me now from the foyer of the House of Commons, Sean Casey. He's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Justice Minister. Michael Cooper is the Deputy Conservative Justice Critic, and Murray Rankin is the NDP's Justice Critic. Good to see you all, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, Sean Casey, I'm going to start with you. It seemed like over the weekend there were a number of other well-known faces and vocal people saying that there is no need to rush with this bill, that it is important the government takes its time. Former Prime Minister Paul Martin, former Liberal leader Bob Rae, and of course Rob Oliphant as well, saying that this isn't going to withstand a charter challenge. So just to rule this out, is there any chance that the government would ask for more time or that you would allow yourself to go past this deadline? Why the rush?
Well, the rush is because of the June 6th deadline imposed by the Supreme Court. So on June the 6th, there will no longer be any criminal prohibition governing medical assistance in dying. So that's the rush, that's the timeline that we've been up against. The fact that there are dissenting views within the Liberal Party shouldn't come as a surprise. There's a diversity of views among Canadians as a whole, and we value debate. So this is healthy, but the June 6th date is critical. Right now, there is a process in place during the extension period where patients can apply to a court for the right to access medical assistance in dying. That ends on June the 6th. Also, there will be no requirement in the criminal code for 2 witnesses. There will be no protection for pharmacists or nurse practitioners. There will be no requirement for 2 doctors. There will be no requirement for record keeping. There will be no requirement that somebody's covered under Medicare.
Right.
So all of these safeguards will evaporate from a criminal law perspective on the 6th of June.
Well, they may do that, or as we're seeing in the province of Alberta today, the provinces may step in and fill the legal vacuum. The province of Alberta is moving forward and putting forward its own criteria. So could that not happen, do you think, that provinces would in some way find a way to restrict things inside their own jurisdictions?
That could absolutely happen to the extent that the provinces have jurisdiction over the delivery of health care. There could be a patchwork in place, so one set of rules in Quebec, one set of rules in Alberta, and different rules or no rules elsewhere. That's entirely possible, and I would suggest to the extent that there's a void, it's appropriate.
And if you compare this, Sean Casey, to abortion, which has never been written into law, what would be the difference here? Why is a law so needed by the government, do you think, given that things could proceed regardless, and as you say, regulations could be put in place by provinces?
Well, look, the Carter case was about doctors. We have the Canadian Medical Association saying grievous and irremediable is too vague. We need better definition. We need better assurance. We have the Canadian Medical Protective Association saying we're going to be providing legal advice to doctors in this situation. So it's for the sake of clarity and protection of medical practitioners, also for protection of the vulnerable. And that's exactly what C-14 does. And without a federal framework, much is being left to chance.
Okay, Michael Cooper, let's bring you into this. If the date gets missed, as the health minister admitted is possible now for the first time today, because there are obviously senators who have issues around this, and it's not going as quickly as the government would like, given that we're just a week away. If the provinces put in place regulations and criteria around this to protect people, would that not be enough to satisfy you?
No, it wouldn't be enough. First of all, it's not a question of it being possible that we're going to miss the June 6th deadline. It is a dead certainty that we are going to miss the June 6th deadline. Well, because it's not going to get into the Senate until Wednesday. The expiration of the stay comes in the following Monday, June 6th. So I think if you look at the calendar, it's very clear we're not going to meet this June 6th deadline. This has been apparent for some time. It was crystal clear at the end of the week when Parliament rose last. And so that's why I'm surprised and disappointed that the Minister of Justice has not proceeded to bring forward an application to the Supreme Court to ask for a further extension. Not a 6-month extension, not a 4-month extension, but perhaps a 1-month or 6-week extension. It's very clear that Parliament is working as expeditiously as possible to pass legislation, but I think that there would be a very compelling case to be made to ask for a further extension.
Although, yeah, the Justice Minister was asked that over the course of the weekend at the Liberal Convention, and she said she had the impression that the response she would get from the Supreme Court was, forget it, go and do your job properly.
Well, it's quite possible the Supreme Court could turn the minister down, but I think it's certainly worth making an effort to bring forward an application, having regard for the consequences that will be in place on June 6th absent a law, which is a vacuum.
But to be fair, I mean, if you miss it by a week, say, which is possible, that you go over it by a week, will chaos ensue in this country? No.
No. Well, what we need is uniformity, and the sooner that we can have uniformity, the better. It is true the colleges are stepping up. The province of Alberta has stepped up today, but we have, as Mr. Casey accurately said, a patchwork with different standards from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and I don't think that that's tenable.
Well, it may not be tenable, but Murray Rankin, in the short term, it might be all there is, and could that not be something the country lives with until the federal government and you guys manage to get this right?
Yeah, I agree with what former Prime Minister Martin and Bob Rae said. There's no big problem if we don't make this magic date. It just means that the issue goes to the doctor, who has to meet each of the stringent criteria for eligibility that the Carter case said. And in every single province and territory, Rosie, they've stepped up, the colleges that govern the doctors, and have put together guidelines. They're not identical, it's true. It'd be better if we had a uniformity, but it's not going to cause any major problems if we don't get it done. Let's do it right, rather than just get it done quickly.
Well, let me push back on you on that point. And the health minister has said that she does think it will cause problems, even if there are patchwork regulations put in place. Here's what Jane Philpott said in question period today, and then I'll get you to respond, Murray Rankin.
Without legislation in place, healthcare providers will not have the legal framework that they require to proceed. They will be advised to seek legal consult. This will cause serious problems in accessing. Not only that, the Canadian Pharmacists Association have made it clear that there will be no protection for pharmacists to dispense medication. We need to get this legislation in place as soon as possible.
So what do you say to that, Murray Rankin, that this is about healthcare providers?
I absolutely don't accept it.
Why not?
Because the colleges responsible for pharmacists in the various provinces and territories will do what the physicians have done, and they'll put together rules to govern this. Look, after June 6, there is no longer a criminal code offense if you meet the stringent criteria, a doctor, for physician-assisted dying. And therefore, the pharmacists will be able to step in. It would be better if we had a bill in place, but we're not going to have it. I agree with Michael Cooper, my colleague. It's not going to happen. I don't think, as Bob Rae and Mr. Martin said, that's going to be the end of this. We'll just take the time to do it properly. I don't see the problem. Of course the minister's right. There's going to be legal opinions sought. There's going to be legal opinions sought by the CMPA as well. They've already said that. So it's not, to me, that big a problem in the short term.
Okay, so Sean Casey, what does the government foresee as the big problem if you miss this deadline of next week? What is going to happen in the country if you allow this to go a little bit longer?
There will be uncertainty among the ranks of the medical professionals. Doctors, pharmacists, and nurse practitioners will not have the clarity that they would have under a national framework. There will also be challenges with respect to the protection of vulnerable populations, because they will no longer have a uniform framework of safeguards and data collection. There will also be the problem that I indicated, that in some jurisdictions, someone that isn't even covered by Medicare could access medical assistance in dying. So you're into medical tourism situation potentially
for a couple of weeks.
So these are some of the potential problems. The biggest single one, quite frankly, is the lack of clarity and the lack of uniformity.
But do you not think that, and we've had this conversation before, do you not think that the Carter decision itself offers some clarity for medical workers, for health workers, and for health ministers in provinces? Could they not use that as a guide over the however many weeks, whether it be 2 more weeks it takes for you to pass this legislation?
According to the Canadian Medical Association, it does not offer adequate clarity. That is also the case with the Canadian Medical Protective Association. So the very doctors who were at issue in the Carter case are the ones that are saying we need a law. We're also hearing it from pharmacists. So look, I don't want to overstate it. I don't think inflammatory language is appropriate. It is certainly less than desirable that we have that gap, and I hope and trust that all parliamentarians, both in this place and in the Senate, will take their responsibilities seriously, and to the extent that we can minimize this void in the legislation, that's what we owe it to Canadians to do.
But if you're so set on making this happen by the deadline, why would the government not be more willing to consider additional amendments, things that would maybe satisfy some of the concerns that people have?
We believe that the bill as presented before Parliament now represents the best solution for Canada now. And we have entertained amendments. There have been 16 amendments that have passed through the committee process. It's entirely possible that more will be adopted tonight. It's entirely possible that some will be presented from the Senate. So bear in mind, Rosie, this is a free vote. And the outcome is anything but predetermined. Parliamentarians will have their say on this.
Okay, Michael Cooper, last thoughts from you on whether, that sounds a little bit like the government's open to some amendments. If there were amendments that were to happen, could this process perhaps be sped up through the Senate at any rate?
Well, we have to move it forward as quickly as possible. That's certainly the case. I'm hopeful that the legislation can be improved. I've put forward 2 amendments that will be voted on this evening. I'm hopeful, obviously, that they pass. I think the legislation certainly is an improvement from the main report of a special joint committee. It's about 70% there, but I believe it still needs improvement.
The gist of your amendments, Michael Cooper, or what?
The gist of the amendments are to protect conscience rights, including for health institutions, not only health professionals, as well as ensuring that persons with mental illness are protected from the standpoint of capacity to consent.
Which I know are 2 of the issues that some senators have concerns around with as well. So perhaps if those get through, that will make things a little bit easier in the Senate. Murray Rankin, last thoughts from you on if there's anything the government could tweak here tonight that would make this happen.
Yeah, Rosie, if they could just see their way clear to do and implement the Supreme Court decision, not just leave it to terminal patients, not just end-of-life reasonably foreseeable death, but people who are suffering and may not be at end of life, but otherwise meet the very specific criteria of Carter, then we'd be fine. That's exactly what the court asks us to do, and we're not doing it now.
Okay, gentlemen, I'll leave it there. It's a serious, important conversation, and I know you're all working hard on it, so thank you very much. Sean Casey,
Thanks,
Michael Cooper, Murray Rankin. Thanks, fellas. Coming up on Power and Politics,